Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. Lotus were one of the biggest names in Formula 1 history. Between 1958 and 1994, they won 6 drivers' titles and 7 constructors' titles. And yet, like a lot of old names, they went bankrupt in the 90s as the sport moved into a new era of ultra-professionalism. This is a look at every driver who raced in Formula 1 for Team Lotus, ranked in order of worst to best, for the famous British team. This list only includes official Team Lotus entries, so none of the many customer entries count, and only the original proper Team Lotus. So that's a no to the Tony Fernandez 2010 Formula 1 entry, and the brief spell Renault had as Lotus in response. This will be a 4-part series as 61 drivers raced for Team Lotus in Formula 1, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the future parts of the Every Lotus Formula 1 driver ever ranked from worst to best series. Tell me in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of these entries, and with that, let's jump into the video. 61. Michael Bartels. The German was racing in International F3000 when he was called up to Lotus for 4 races to step in for Johnny Herbert. He failed to qualify for all 4 of those races, usually the slowest or near enough to it. Bartels went back to International F3000 and scored a few podiums, but never came back to Formula 1. He did go on to win races in the DTM, be a generally okay touring car driver, and won several GT championships whilst running his own team, but failing to qualify 4 times makes him the worst Lotus driver ever. Number 60, Pete Lovely. The race driver and Volkswagen dealer had a few goes at Formula 1 between 1959 and 1971. He failed to qualify for 4 of his 11 entries, including his very first one with Lotus in 1959. Pete Lovely bravely attempted to qualify for the season opening Monaco Grand Prix, and whilst he was 8 seconds down on poleman Sterling Moss, he only missed out on qualification by a few seconds. He went on to make appearances in Formula 1 in self-entered Lotus cars, with a best finish of 7th at the 1969 Canadian Grand Prix. Number 59, Roberto Moreno. The popular Brazilian raced for many teams in Formula 1, but none did as much damage to his career as his single appearance for Team Lotus in 1982. He was a rising star of single-seaters, winning races in Formula Atlantic and Formula 3. He stood in for Nigel Mansell at the Dutch Grand Prix in 1982, but he had barely driven the Lotus 91, which was infamously a dog to drive. Moreno struggled on, but failed to qualify, 2 seconds off Jan Lammers in a Theodore racing car. Lotus dropped Moreno at the end of 1982. He had to wait 5 years for another opportunity in Formula 1 with AGS, and spent most of his time at the back of the field, with teams like Colony, Eurobrun, Andrea Moda, Forti, Minardi and Jordan, but did at least score a podium with Benetton. If not for that Lotus drive, he would have probably got a full-time seat somewhere in 1983, and his career would have been very different. Number 58, Tim Schenken. This was the final race of the Australians' time in Formula 1. Tim Schenken had raced for Frank Williams' early team, Brabham and Surtees, before racing for Trojan in 1974. After scoring no points with Trojan in their only Formula 1 season, Schenken had his final drive for Lotus at the final round of the year at Watkins Glen. He failed to qualify for the race and was disqualified after starting it anyway. He would go on to have a lot of success in sports cars and has played a huge role in the Australian motorsport scene. Number 57, Alex Soleroig. Another driver who failed to start a race for Lotus was Spaniard Alex Soleroig. He failed to qualify for the Spanish Grand Prix of 1970, but only just. He then failed to get out for the Belgian Grand Prix and failed to qualify again for the French. They were his 3 appearances for Lotus. He went on to make the grid for March and BRM in 1971 and 1972 respectively, but never finished a Formula 1 Grand Prix. He was a champion in GT racing of the time, but retired from racing at the end of his brief spell in Formula 1 to take over the family business. Number 56, Dave Charlton. Entered 9 South African Grand Prix between 1965 and 1975. He did enter a few other races as well. In 1971 and 1972, he ventured outside of Africa, mostly in a customer Lotus, but he did enter a couple of Grand Prix with the Works Lotus team. Dave Walker crashed in practice for the Dutch Grand Prix, but Dave Charlton did race in the 1971 British Grand Prix. He qualified 13th, but only did 1 lap before his engine blew. He went on to race for Lucky Strike Racing, owned by fellow South African race driver Neville Liddell. Never a big deal on the world scene, but Dave Charlton was a 6-time South African F1 champion and raced nationally until the mid-80s. Number 55, John Watson. 5 Formula 1 wins and third in the championship in 1982. The first of those wins came for Team Penske in 1976. Prior to that, John Watson raced for Goldie Hexagon, Team Surtees, and single appearances for Brabham and Team Lotus. He qualified 14th but retired after 2 laps of the Nordschleife with handling issues. Obviously, he would go on to do better things. Number 54, Willy Mares. The Belgian's Formula 1 career peaked early with Ferrari in 1960 and a podium at Monza. In 1961, he had a single race for Lotus at the French Grand Prix. He qualified near the back but did survive 20 laps into the race. He would get another chance to score points with Ferrari, taking that chance at Monza again, but he was gone from Formula 1 by the end of 1963 after breaking his arm in a big crash at the 1963 German Grand Prix. He would put in a few decent Le Mans performances, but sadly passed away from an overdose in 1968. 53, Piers Courage. Debuted in Formula 1 in the Formula 2 Lotus at the 1966 German Grand Prix, but crashed out of the race. Piers Courage raced for Lotus in Formula 3 and performed well in mediocre machinery. He made his full-time debut in 1968 for Reg Parnell, and was the first driver signed by Frank Williams and the original Williams team, scoring 2 second places in a customer Brabham car in 1969. He raced for Williams again in 1970, but was killed in a crash at the 1970 Dutch Grand Prix when the magnesium in the De Tomaso chassis ignited after a suspension failure caused a massive crash. Number 52, Bill Bracke. Canadian Bill Bracke was another that took part in a single race for Lotus, and like everyone else on this list so far, he didn't finish it. He took part in 3 Canadian Grand Prix, with the first being for Lotus in 1968. He qualified nearly last and retired from the race after 18 laps. He did go on to have success at national level in Formula Atlantic. Number 51, Eppie Weitzes. Another Canadian to race for Lotus was Eppie Weitzes, and the most interesting trivia about him is he was the first ever safety car driver in Formula 1 all the way back in 1973. He made a single appearance at the 1967 Canadian Grand Prix for Lotus. Struggling with electronics issues, he did complete 69 laps but was disqualified for receiving outside assistance. Not that it really made a difference anyway. After driving the first safety car at the 1973 Canadian Grand Prix, he would make one more appearance in Formula 1 in 1974 for Team Canada. He was actually born in Assen in the Netherlands. Number 50, Giancarlo Baghetti. After winning his debut Formula 1 race in a customer Ferrari, the rest of Baghetti's career went downhill. He scored points for Ferrari but then failed to for the rest of his Formula 1 career, failing to score with ATS, Reg Parnell, Scuderia Centra Sud, Brabham, and his one final appearance for Lotus in 1967. This was the Italian Grand Prix. Baghetti qualified down in 17th and retired near the end of the race. A sad end to a promising career. Number 49, Eric Bernard. Many of these drivers did 1 or 2 races at the start of Lotus's time in Formula 1. Eric Bernard was one of the last Lotus drivers in Formula 1. He had raced in Formula 1 for a few years with Larousse and Ligier, getting few good results bar a podium earlier in 1994. He was swapped by Ligier with Lotus for Johnny Herbert and is the first driver on our list to actually finish a race, albeit down in 18th. He went on to have a much more successful career racing sports cars. Number 48, Brian Henton. The 1974 British F3 champion made his Formula 1 debut with Team Lotus in 1975, finishing 16th at the British Grand Prix and 10 laps down at the US Grand Prix. He was also meant to start in Austria but had a crash in practice in a weekend marred by several big crashes. He would go on to make nearly 40 appearances for several teams, but he never scored points, and his final season was his best, finishing just outside the points several times with Tyrrell in 1982, retiring from racing shortly after. Number 47, Philippe Adams. An unimpressive driver by all accounts, he was runner-up in British F3 in 1992 and won the short-lived British Formula 2 series in 1993. He managed to pay for a couple of Formula 1 races with a dying Lotus team in 1994. He qualified last and second to last, spun out of the Belgian Grand Prix, but did finish 16th and 4 laps down in Portugal. He raced in sports cars and touring cars thereafter, but didn't really do anything of note. Number 46, Jean-Pierre Jarier. A talented driver, but his 2 races for Lotus came about in very unfortunate circumstances, taking over from the recently deceased Ronnie Peterson, who we will be looking at several videos from now. Jean-Pierre Jarier eventually ended up getting off a podium with Shadow and Tyrrell, but he didn't have a lot of success. He did manage to stick around for 12 years and nearly 150 races. He raced for 8 different teams, but only twice for Lotus. He finished 15th in the 1978 American Grand Prix and retired from the year-ending Canadian Grand Prix. That race, Jarier qualified on pole and had built up a big lead until his Lotus decided to break down. He almost got a podium in America, but ran out of fuel several laps before the end. Despite 2 very good performances, Jean-Pierre Jarier ended up at Tyrrell in 1979 and had his best Formula 1 season. So they are the first 16 of 61 drivers in the ranking every Team Lotus Formula 1 driver ever from worst to best list. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss parts 2, 3 and 4. I have done this same premise on Ferrari, Brabham, Williams and McLaren in the past, so check out those videos in the playlist in the end card. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you disagree with any of these placings? Thank you very much for watching and have a good one.